Well, here we are in North America at the end of November. And I'm not sure where you're listening to this from, but in both of our countries, Canada and the US, we are smack dab in the middle of deer hunting season. So today on Finding Traction, our topic is lessons from rutting season.
Guys ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Well, guys, today, let me just say we got a bit of a different kind of podcast today. One of my really fun things in coaching guys and coaching groups is I work with guys from all walks of life, from all locations. I work with guys that are working on, aircraft carriers to running their UPS thing. Well, one of the guys that I've been working with in a group is an avid deer hunter. And a couple times when we've been on Zoom calls and group calls, he's been up in his deer blind with all of his camo on. And we started talking about some of the connections between rutting season, deer hunting season, and recovery. And I said to him, Joey, we've got to have you come on and talk about this. So Joey, want to welcome you to Finding Traction. It's great to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
And let me just say, I don't know. Even though I'm from Canada and I got a lot of buddies that are hunters, I never caught the bug. I don't know if it's because I'm a lover, not a killer, or watched Bambi when I was a young child. I don't know what it is. So I've just never, I like to fish, but I've never caught the hunting thing. So let's pretend a little bit that this is one of those wildlife shows, geographic shows, before we get into recovery. And I want you to initiate me into understanding deer, white-tailed deer, and this whole process of hunting them and what just what does it look like? So build me up, bring me into this conversation for the uninitiated.
Yeah, so I've been deer hunting most of my life. I grew up, my dad was a hunter and he fished, but we didn't really do that much together. But when I became an adult, I really got into it, and so it's an escape for me, being a pastor, being in ministry. Sometimes like on your day off, you find yourself running to Sam's Club or running errands for the church. And that, I found that to take an actual day off and to really relax and to detach from everything, I had to get in the woods or I had to get on a boat and go fishing, and it just takes my mind off of it for a half a day or a whole day, whatever it is. And so when you're in there, I've been studying deer and fish my whole life, and just it's fascinating to see their tendencies, to see, how they operate and how, I want to pull some fish out of the water. I want to kill a deer, but deer don't want to be killed. And so their survival is dependent upon them being vigilant. And so most of the time they are just super, what I always described, if anybody listening's ever seen like a crackhead or a meth addict, that's a deer. They're just always skittish. They're always jumpy. They're always they're just schizophrenic, or whatever.
Is that like white-tailed deer in particular are that way?
Yeah, mule deer are different. Mule deer are less skittish. If you go out to like Arizona, like I was at the Grand Canyon one time and I had some mule deer, or in Colorado, sometimes they'll just walk right up on you. But white-tailed deer, there's just something about them. They're just so jumpy. They're not trusting at all. And so the slightest thing. And so I can go into that a little bit.
Like you mentioned to me something about even their lack of curiosity or something. Like what tell me about that.
So obviously their survival is dependent upon this, but like they're by nature not a curious animal. And so if I'm in a tree stand, it's one of the craziest things, because like I'll be in a tree stand and a deer will walk under my stand or just in the area, and squirrels will be making all kinds of racket in the tree, and it's driving me nuts. And a deer won't even look up. They just instinctually know that that's a squirrel and it means them no danger.
Hmm.
There's been other animals come through and just not, they don't even pay them any bother. But as soon as I like move my leg or bump into my tree stand in the slightest bit, they're looking right at me and they're on edge. They
Hmm.
know that that's not a normal sound, and so now they're cautious. And as soon as they can identify what's going on, they just run. Now sometimes they blow, and I can't really describe that, but they whenever they blow, that's usually to indicate to the other deer in the area, hey, there's danger here, get out of here. And so, like I said, they're not curious, so their instincts are, as soon as they think they're in danger, they don't like walk over and investigate. And like if
Hmm.
they smell something, deer have an incredible sense of smell. Their eyesights are better than ours, but not like their sense of smell. And and their hearing is really good. And kind of they got a sixth sense, because sometimes they'll just be in the woods and they just think, I'm just looking at them and I didn't make any noise, but they just know something's not right. And then what they do is they never go and investigate. They never go, let me go see what's making this noise or what I saw.
Hmm.
They just turn and run. And that's the only way they can survive, because they don't have any way to defend themselves other than just running.
Right.
They don't have claws. They're not going to bite you. So if a predator is coming after them, the only thing they can do is run. And so that's true for deer for about 50 weeks out of the year.
Oh,
Now,
okay. Okay. So just let me stop there for a second. So all of that 50 weeks of the year, we now have a problem. I mean, let's forget when it's legal and illegal to hunt.
yeah,
But
yeah,
generally there's a problem hunting white-tailed deer because your goal is to kill them and
yeah,
they don't want to be killed.
right.
And all of the things that you've just described are working against you
Yeah,
in bagging a deer and being a successful deer. So you're hooped. You don't have a shot, whether you're hidden or not, you're not going to get your deer. However, now introduce me to the change.
yeah. So for about 2 weeks out of the year, there's a change that happens, and especially to the big bucks, because right, I mean, I'm after a big buck, a
Yeah.
big mature buck, 4.5, 5.5 years old. And they get to be mature because they don't go investigate things. They just
Mm-hmm.
run, and their in survival instincts take over. And so, but the rut happens for about 2 weeks out of the year, and probably like the second week of November, sometimes the first week. It really lines up with the moon phases. But whenever that happens, whenever the rut kicks in, the rutting season is their breeding season. And
Okay.
so you have the does that are coming into season, and so the bucks want to mate with all of them. And
Mm-hmm.
so, especially if you're a dominant mature buck, this is your area. They're very territorial, and they'll come and they make these scrapes, and that's they'll do a scrape in the ground, and they'll just like paw at the ground and clear out all the
Hmm.
leaves, and then they'll pee in it, and it leaves
Yep.
their scent behind. And then there's usually a branch above them, and they'll rub their heads on that, and their foreheads secrete this gland. They have this gland that secretes a scent
Okay.
that lets all the other bucks in the area know that I'm the dominant buck, and if you come
Right.
in here, you're going to have a fight on your hands. So
Okay.
all of that, and the same thing with the does. A lot of time I've done this before, but you can go to Walmart or Bass Pro and you can buy doe urine,
Mm-hmm.
and you put it out in your stand, and that's a doe and rut
Mm-hmm.
urine and estrus. And so that's what a buck is looking for. He's roaming the woods during the rut, and he's trying to smell a doe. That's what we call it. She's hot, a doe
Mm-hmm.
that's hot. She's ready to breed. And and that's all
It's
that's
just
on
that
this.
some of you guys are thinking, dude, this has got so many parallels here, but we're gonna hold off with the parallels for a bit.
Yeah, yeah. And so some of the other things that happen is, if you see a big mature buck like right before the rut, His neck is all swelled up, and he's been eating really good because deer are nocturnal. So whitetails just in general are nocturnal. So what they do is they're up all night long, and about an hour before daylight to about an hour after daylight, they start to make their way out into the fields or from the fields, and they start to feed. And then after maybe an hour or two of daylight, they start to make their way back into the bedding areas where they'll go back there, and it's like a secluded area. A lot of times it's some high grass, but where they're away from predators pretty much. And so they'll go back there and they'll stand around most of the day. They'll lay down. Deer, I looked this up. I was doing some studying on this a while back, and I found out that deer only sleep about 30 minutes a day. And they don't even get a complete 30 minutes. Like they'll go and they'll like close their eyes for about 10 minutes, and then they'll wake up and they'll stand up about 10 or 15 minutes later. They'll do that again. So they'll do that about 30 minutes total a day. And so I thought about it. It's like, no wonder they're like crackheads. They're always amped up. They're always on edge. They haven't got proper rest. And so they're just jittery. And so
the males coming into season, they're primed and ready to go.
Yeah. So bucks have been fattened up. And if you get one right at the beginning of the rut, you can tell his neck's all swollen up, and he's a huge deer. If you kill a buck at the end of rutting season, like after that 2 weeks, he loses so much weight. I've killed big bucks before where when I got up on him, he's like drenched in sweat. And the reason is they don't rest during those 2 weeks, like morning and night, like day and night. They're just on the go, constantly on the prowl, looking for does. And when they find one, they start to chase them. And there's something that happens whenever a buck catches up with a doe who's hot and she's ready to breed. They don't do it right away. Like he chases her and she runs for a little bit. It's kind of like a dance. It's kind of like a cat and mouse game. And they'll do that for a while, maybe half a day or whatever it is. And then finally she'll let him mount her and breed her. And, but the meantime, like he's, and as soon as he's done, he's on to the next one. And so he's not worried about rest. He's not worried about food. He doesn't hardly eat anything during those 2 weeks. And so the thing about the rut, the reason why most, I know in Missouri, they coincide the hunting season with the rut, because that gives you the best chance to get a shot at a buck. Because, back to what we said earlier. So the first, for 50 weeks out of the year, a deer is super cautious, but during the rut, it's like they go stupid because the bucks, they have one thing on their mind. And so normally they'll walk through the woods, and if they see me move or hear me or smell something, ordinarily they're just like, I'm gone. But not during the rut. During the rut, they're like, because if they're with a female, if they're with a doe, they're not leaving her. Even if they see something they don't like, even if they sense something they don't like, a lot of times they stay with her. And I've had bucks come through, and I've taken a shot at them and missed with my bow, and they kind of spooked out of there, but he's chasing after her. And 10 minutes later, she brings him right back under my stand again and gives me another shot, and I get him. And ordinarily that would never happen, but because he throws caution to the wind, because he's thinking with the wrong brain, wrong head.
Exactly.
And so he ends up on my wall, and so that happens to a lot of bucks, and they just go stupid for about 2 weeks. And, and then some of the other things that happen too is while they're in that mode of they're just filled with testosterone, and the does are filled with estrus, and so whenever I probably not gonna be able to do this, but you can insert something later. But
I
don't know if you heard that.
Yeah, we heard that. Do that again.
Okay.
So he's not. No, just a second. For the listener, they may think he's burping, but you're not.
No, this is a grunt call. And so if you've ever been in the woods and you've in a tree stand and you hear and you see a big buck chasing a doe, he's constantly making this sound. And so whenever I see a big buck, And now if he's chasing a doe, he won't come to this call because he's already got one
Yeah.
and he's already preoccupied. But if I do that, and he'll like, I took my son a couple weeks ago and he got his first deer, and it was a big buck. And we saw this big buck about 40, 50 yards away. He was walking away from us, and I did the grunt call, and he turned and started coming at us. Now, the other thing that I do, I don't know if you can hear this or not, but this is a snort wheeze. So when I do that, that's when a big buck is telling another big buck, if you come near me, I'm gonna fight you. That's what he. And so when they're filled with testosterone and they're just territorial. They're one dominant buck is about to fight with another dominant buck. When they hear that noise, they come in for a fight. And so what I also have is a rattle bag. I don't know if you can hear this or not, but sometimes I'll rattle and I'll just rattle like that.
Put it closer. Just see if we can try again. Rattle it. What's the rattle sound of?
So deer will fight. Two big bucks will lock horns, and they'll just start fighting. And
that's the sound of their antlers.
Yeah, that's the sound of their antlers. And so if a big buck is walking through the woods and he hears that rattle, he's like, there's two other bucks fighting. I want to get in on that. So he'll go running towards them, looking for a fight. And that's when he'll end up on my wall. Something interesting though, if your listeners are interested, go online and Google bucks fighting and dying. Sometimes there's been 3 bucks locked together, and sometimes when they start to fight, their horns get locked together, and they do that till they die. Sometimes they get drugged through the water and one of them drowns. And then you got this other, like I just watched one the other day where this big buck had the horns and a head of a dead buck, just the head. He like ripped off of the body and just carrying that around.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
okay.
So they go in looking for a fight, and I get, some of the applications for that is anger. If you have a lot of anger, you're gonna end up on somebody's wall. And
well, let's first of all, you not only hunt with your rifle, you hunt with a bow.
Yeah.
So that puts you in a whole different category altogether. So you're a serious hunter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I feel completely tutored, not neutered, but tutored in deer hunting. So just like I have a buddy that's a fisherman, and he, although whenever I go out with him, my buddy Jake, he never catches anything. So he stopped inviting me, but he's like one of these salt of the earth fishermen that knows how to tie flies and all of that. So, okay. So let's go back. And I'm sure that, if you've been, tracking with this, you're already making a whole bunch of parallels, but let's go back and just talk a little bit about some of these parallels from rutting season, and talk to me a little bit about vigilance and curiosity. What are the connections that you're making here?
Yeah, well, so obviously with a deer, most of the time they're vigilant, but when they get filled with testosterone and they got sex on the brain, they ignore certain things that ordinarily they wouldn't. Well, the same is true with most guys that I know. You get you get triggered with something, your stopwatch analogy. Once you get triggered, now you're just, usually it's just a matter of time if you don't do something that now you're triggered, and it's just a matter of time before you end up on someone's wall. I do have a verse, being a pastor, James 1:14. I love this verse. It says, temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. And the words in the original language, entice us, is the word for bait. And so it has the idea of like fish. Like sometimes I love to go fishing for catfish, and sometimes they'll get underneath a wall or like a ledge. And, the only way to get them out, well, some guys will go down there and noodle, and they'll stick their arm down there. I'm not going to do that. That's stupid. But it's a fishing lure. So you put a fishing lure in front of their face, and it entices them. And then here's the thing, Vern, like every guy I know has something that entices them. Like fish have different lure, like depending on what time of the year, what time of the day. Like your color might be different than my color. But the same is true with guys and dealing with sexual addiction, sexual desires. Not every guy's attracted to the same thing,
Yep.
but we have a real enemy and he does know what your preference is. And so he's not going to bother tempting you with something that you're like, that has no interest in me.
Well, and to throw that verse and to come at it with a similar verse, you're talking about your enemy. There's another verse that talks about be alert.
Be alert. Yeah.
And self-controlled, your enemy. And
Yeah.
normally you're saying deer are highly alert creatures.
Highly alert.
They've been designed that way. But for whatever reason, once they begin to, we describe that tunnel vision begins to happen. And the phrase you use is they throw caution to the wind. For that season, in that scenario, all of those natural things are just forgotten, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and they just, like I said, they just go stupid for a couple of weeks out of the year. And I think about all the guys that I know, and probably every guy that I know, just when you just have sex on the brain, you just go stupid. Like you ignore some of the dumbest things. Like I know guys that have fallen into immorality, and guys, great pastors that I know of who have fallen into that, and I'm like, how could it happen to them? Well, it happens the way it happens to everybody else. They let their guard down. And, I know of one guy who was really overweight. He was a pastor and he'd been married for like 40 years. And so the lust in his marriage had kind of worn off, I guess. But he lost a bunch of weight. He started going to the gym and he started feeling better about himself. And he met a girl that was a lady at the gym. And, ended up having an affair with her, and you could set all back to just him. Where did that go wrong? Well, for him, it was he lost a bunch of weight and he wasn't feeling so great about his marriage, and here's this woman giving him some attention, and you just get stupid because that's something he absolutely regrets. If he get in a time, if he could get in a time machine and go back, he absolutely would. But you can't. And so, yeah.
Well, and it's interesting. I was just thinking as you were talking, curiosity was an interesting thing because you described naturally the idea that deer are not curious was their saving grace.
Yeah.
And one of most of us, for example, who struggle with porn, we got into porn originally, 10, 11, 12, 13, maybe, simply because of natural curiosity. And that was a bit of the lure, the bit of the hook. But as I say to guys, I say to them, edging is not your friend. Research is not your friend. Yeah. Whenever you have that idea, you know what? I wonder if this actress is in another, in another show. I wonder if she's married. Curiosity, gentlemen, is not your friend. Yeah. Research is not your friend. And there's something about this idea of, I'll give you a couple real simple examples from just the last 2 days. Okay. This idea of vigilance, this idea of being alert. If we always have to be thinking ahead. It's not just our immediate surroundings, but it is partly looking ahead. Here's two situations. I had to get a new, my phone contract was up, had to get a new contract. And so I was going to go yesterday. My wife was at work. I was going to get the phone switched over, but I was thinking, oh, so if I get my phone switched over for a while, I'm not going to have screen time activated. And you know what? It would just be wiser for me to wait and do that with her after school. Right? That was just one little example, just being alert, thinking, okay, well, I probably am okay. I'm probably okay. There's probably no hunter up in the deer stand in that neck of the woods. I'm probably fine, but I might not have been. And then on top of that, I heard that, my favorite football team playing on Thanksgiving, the big halftime show was Dolly Parton along with the cheerleaders. And I'm going, I'm not a huge Dolly Parton fan, but I'm just thinking, maybe I don't need to watch that halftime show. Right. And now all of you who watch the halftime show, now you're all feeling shame and regret, but whatever. I just said, you know what? Probably that's not going to serve me well. Let's show some level of alertness and vigilance in my recovery. So So curiosity is not your friend, is what you're telling me, if you're a deer or you're in recovery, Joey.
Yeah. And back to that verse, it says our temptations come from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. If you think about fish, if you put a lure in front of its mouth and he doesn't think he's going to get dragged out of the water, he's just like,
Right.
that looks really good. I'm hungry.
Yeah.
That's going to satisfy my desire. And he
Yeah.
grabs onto it. And then he's like, oh crap. Right. I
Yeah.
made a big mistake. But then it's too late, And
Yeah.
so whenever we get into that, area where, we just, whatever it is, like for me, it was, I found my dad's pornography stash when I was in the third grade.
Yep.
And there was a lot of curiosity for me there. I was like, I didn't know what any of that stuff was, but I
Right.
began to watch those tapes and look through those magazines at an early age. And, and that really did something to me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what to do with all those emotions, but I knew it, it was exciting, it was
Yeah.
exhilarating. So
And at that age, you didn't realize that there was a barb,
yeah.
there was any of that thing mixed in. So, okay, hey, talk to me a couple things. We're just pulling this idea of self care. It's interesting how the bucks were all jacked up and a lot of self care.
Yeah.
At the
Yeah.
end of it, there's not. I want to just make a couple parallels there, because how many guys, when they get into a whole pattern of porn use, and it just becomes embedded in their lives, it's like self-care just is thrown out. Would you say that you've seen that as well?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times when you're tired or you just want to, you just want an escape, like you've been
Yeah.
working yourself crazy and your family stressing you out, or, and seems like your wife's always mad at you or whatever, whatever's going on in your life, and that
Right.
becomes an escape for you. And so you got to learn. What I'm learning is to take care of myself, to try to take care of myself physically and emotionally and spiritually, all those things, because I don't do those things by naturally, right? I mean,
Right.
I've been on this diet for a while. I'm doing a carnivore diet. I started back today
Okay.
because I have no self-control. I've learned that about myself, that I have no self-control. Yesterday was Thanksgiving and I hadn't had any sweets in months, probably 6 months. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to have a piece of pie today. I
Right.
had pecan pie,
Oh
and
my.
I didn't have just one piece. I had two pieces. And
Right.
then later when I got home, I had two pieces of pumpkin pie. And I'm like, this is why I have to stay on a diet, because I don't trust myself. I have no self-control. And so I just need to steer clear of all the sweets, or else it ruin me.
Well, and it's interesting when you talk to guys who are in a long season of sustained porn use. Number one, their sleep they're not getting a good 7, 8, 9 hour, 8 hours of sleep. They're because a lot of their porn is at night. They're watching, and I would say the difference is a lot of guys go through weight gain because
Yeah.
they're not being careful with what they're eating. And so a lot of guys struggle with their weight. So which would be the exact opposite of the bucks. But weight is an issue just because it's a part, they're just grabbing junk food to medicate or as part of that. They feel horrible about their porn use. So then they're stuffing themselves, with that as well. So, well, talk to me a little bit about this idea of anger and aggression, with what you see in rutting season. Where do you see parallels there?
Yeah, I mean, for deer, obviously, they go in looking for a fight and they end up, getting shot, or they hear some rattling or they hear a grunt call and they know there's another big buck, and so they come in, they're angry. I don't know, just my observation, what I've learned about addiction, about sexual addiction. If you one of the things that surprised me is that a lot of it stems from anger, from like
Hmm.
our disappointments,
Right.
from just we're mad at the world, or we're mad at ourselves, and sometimes you get into this cycle, like like you've been doing good for a while and you got into that temptation today, and you messed up, so you're like, well, I did it once, so I might as well just do it again, and you just spend all day looking at pornography, and then one day turns into 2 days, and then now you've been spending all week doing it,
Yeah.
and you're filled with shame, and and what I've discovered about this addiction is that it's not about the fruit. The addiction is the fruit, but it's about the roots. And
Hmm.
And so we got to figure out what's really going on. Like,
Mm,
why are we going to that to use that as a medication? And I
right.
didn't understand that pornography was used as a medication. I always would have just said, you're just horny and
Yeah.
you have a sexual desire, and maybe it's an unmet desire. Maybe your spouse is not meeting that, or whatever. And so you're just going to serve that yourself. But it's much deeper than that, because otherwise you would just be able to walk away from it.
Right.
Um, I mean, I don't know any guy that struggles with pornography that wouldn't stop if they could,
Right.
if they could push a button, they would push that button and be done with it, but I all the time hear pastors, well-meaning pastors going, well, you just don't love God enough, or you need to pray more, or
Right.
whatever. And it's like,
Yeah.
if it was only that easy,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not that easy. There's obviously something much deeper going on. And one of the big things is anger.
Right.
Um, and that's how you deal with it. That's a lot of guys' ways of coping with their anger.
Yeah. And one of my favorite pieces of unhelpful advice is you just need to learn to hate the porn.
Yeah.
I'm going, well, but I don't. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. And I think that's been one of the big takeaways. I know you've read Unwanted by Jay Stringer, and one
Yeah.
of the big takeaways was how, to a lot of guys, unmanageable or problematic sexual behavior comes out of two tributaries. There's a lot of language, in religious circles, Christian circles, but even SA circles about the word lust. Oh,
Yeah.
it's lust, it's my flesh. But Jay Stringer brings about, he says, well, that's one tributary, but there's another whole tributary, which what you're referring to, and that is anger. And most people go, well, I'm not angry, but there's a lot of, we're passive aggressive. Our anger is basically hidden in all sorts of ways. But anger is actually something which is probably the most undiagnosed disease in many men's lives. And it precedes much of our acting out. Of course, it's also the result of our acting out as well, and our disappointment with maybe ourselves and people around us. So, you know what? So, whether or not it takes one of those rattle things or whatever, I think most of us would go. I ask a lot of guys, do you have a problem with anger? And initially they say, no, I'm not an angry person. Then I say to them, well, go talk to the people closest to you and ask them, are you angry? Or maybe use a different word. Are you irritable?
Yeah.
Are you resentful? Are you always going off about, this politician or that situation or that, well,
Or even complaining. If you're
yeah,
complaining all the time, then that you're just dissatisfied with
yeah,
what's going on.
yeah,
And disappointments is a big one.
yeah,
Guys get mad at God, they get mad at their spouses for not
yeah,
being, something you always talk about is, guys get married thinking their wives want to have sex with them every day for the rest of their lives. And
absolutely. Yeah.
they're like, once I get married, I won't struggle with pornography anymore because my wife will meet that need. And like, no, sorry, she's not going.
Every,
I'm
I go,
sorry.
every day is rutting season, right?
Yeah. 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 Not so much. Maybe for you, but not for her.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Joey, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. I have learned a lot about deer hunting. I don't know if I'm going to still be a deer hunter, but thank you for coming on the show. Thanks
Yeah.
for educating us. And if you're a hunter, this probably makes a lot of sense to you. And if not, just take the takeaways, whether you pick up a rifle or a bow and arrow or not. It's great to have the listeners here. And once again, a huge thank you, Joey.
Yeah. No problem.